Mike McCarthy is back for the 2024 season. We break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, but the first time on a Thursday since
that's true.
Yeah. Landon McCool. Follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Usually our Thursday shows are our crossover shows. Not this week.
Why?
We don't have to talk about that. Landon, let's talk about the big news that we had a feeling coming.
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy back in 2024. I'm trying to be as enthusiastic as possible because Cowboys Nation is not right now. I want to know your initial feelings and thoughts when you saw the news.
First of all, I love this role reversal that's happening right now between us where, I'm like, oh God, and you're like super excited. My first thought was, there it is. Okay. And honestly, I have a feeling that that's going to be my default reaction to a lot of things this season. It's like, okay, there it is. It's like, I think it's not surprising. It's not shocking. I think, you and I had our 2 or 3 days of trying to pontificate on what an alternate universe version of the Dallas Cowboys would look like. But I think we both were pretty not on board, let's say, but pretty certain that it was going to be McCarthy coming back and just kind of running the whole situation back. And I think we've laid out all the reasons why, right? I mean, just the Dak's contract, Mike having another year left. I think that there is a lot of history pushing against Jerry on letting go of coaches early, especially again, we mentioned the Chan Gailey situation. And, this is even more difficult for someone like Jerry because this is a guy who has produced 3 12-win seasons, as we mentioned back, all in a row. So I guess my response was, like I said, not surprised, not so much disappointed because I have kind of resigned to it. But I think that it's going to be very difficult for Cowboys fans to kind of fully just, get back into the swing of things and be excited again about this team with, basically everything unchanged from what was a very disappointing season.
So there's going to be changes.
There'll be some changes. Yeah.
And I think there's going to be significant changes. We're going to talk about those changes in a little bit, but I think a couple things. I got to be really careful how I say some of these things. So number one, I think the reason why Mike McCarthy is back is because of the support that he has in the locker room. And you even saw it on social media yesterday. You had guys like Jake Ferguson and Wanye Thomas and Izzy Mukamu, really excited that Mike McCarthy is coming back. And I think if there were players in that locker room that were out on Mike McCarthy or felt like he lost the locker room, I think you would have seen a change, but it doesn't sound like that's the case at all. And I posed this question to you yesterday. One of the things that I noticed is that a lot of the beat reporters that are there in the locker room all seem to believe it was the right move to bring Mike McCarthy back. And I'm not saying they're right, but I just thought that was interesting because I think a lot of those beat guys weren't exactly thrilled with Mike McCarthy when he got hired. But to see so many of them being like, hey, yeah, this is the right move, made me think that maybe this culture isn't as bad as it looked on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we need to parse this really carefully, right? Because I don't think that bringing back Mike McCarthy was a mistake. Like I think this is really difficult, so it's hard to kind of explain. I think that Mike McCarthy is a good option for being the coach next year if you want to win a bunch of football games and put yourself back in a position to do this again. It makes some sense. I think the argument that's being made is that, you know, if you want to change what's going to happen, you need to change what's happening, right? And like,
Well,
I think that
and
that's not likely to happen. You know, I
well,
guess that's ultimately the issue. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands. I don't think that hiring Mike McCarthy is bad or that Mike McCarthy is a bad coach. I just think that it shows an unwillingness by the Cowboys to ultimately probably do what they need to do to break through this glass ceiling, you know, and they're just going to continue to do the tinker route, which, you know, I just feel like we've seen before and has not produced the results we want.
so the Cowboys obviously couldn't go out and interview other head coaching options with Mike McCarthy under contract.
Yeah.
It's prohibited.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means that they didn't do their due diligence on
Sure.
potential replacements. And I just get the feeling that when Jerry Jones was presented a list of names, that he looked at the list of names and felt like none of these guys are clear upgrades over Mike McCarthy. So why not just stick with what we have basically a 1-year shot with McCarthy here where everybody knows the goal and what the outcome is going to be if we don't reach a certain goal. Let's just go ahead and do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard this argument before, like 8 or 9 years in a row. I feel like I've heard this argument. So, and that's fine. Like, I think like that it's easy to convince yourself, oh, well, this time we'll have a different assistant defensive back coach.
Well, okay.
You know,
You've heard
that'll make the difference.
You've heard some of the rumblings. Did the names that could potentially replace Mike McCarthy excite you?
Oh, no, but that also goes back to the problem. No, listen. Let me be clear what you're hinting at. I 100% agree that the whispers I've heard, Mike McCarthy is the best choice of the whispers I've heard. Let me be very clear. But that's not the problem. The problem is a willingness to accept, you know, a wider net and to actually change things, because ultimately, you know, what they're viewing as change is, could we bring in another well-treaded coach to do a lot of the same stuff? And that to me is not, that's just more of the same. Like whether you hired Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick or you know, any of these guys, like, it's not like, you know, you're getting a huge amount of ultimate change. You may change the systems, but it's all the same kind of last generation of football thought. It's a list of names of people who have gotten their butts kicked by modern football coaches in the last 5 years. So I tend to think that, you know, yeah, I mean, I guess if your idea of change is to just bring in a different retread head coach who's going to do it, you know, have a different set of kind of dusty old systems that you're going to bring in and, like, you know, bring in. Yeah, I guess that it's a better choice than that. But what I've been asking for, and again, this is probably the last day to talk about this, so we'll move on. What I've been asking for is holistic change, like land, like actual,
like franchise altering change.
Yes,
right?
like actual, like ground shifting beneath your feet change, not like, oh, well, you know, this time it's going to be the 2022 Cowboys, but there's going to be some changes. We got a different guy as our offensive coordinator, quality control coach, and he's really going to make the difference this year. It's like, all right, man, I've seen it before, but yeah, here we are.
Just a side note, I do wonder with Mike McCarthy going into a lame duck year, if number one, the Cowboys give him an extension just so we can stop talking about the contract, or
what a reason to do that, by the way. What a reason to do something like that. I'm sorry.
Or, I mean, galaxy braining it a little bit. If everybody in the NFL knows that Mike McCarthy is in the final year of his deal, maybe some other coaches would start angling and positioning themselves to be ready to take that job in 2025. Just a thought.
Well, real quick before we go, before we move on, I do think that there's something to the idea that the Cowboys have a real problem making these decisions in a timely manner, right? So I do like the idea that maybe at least if this is the case where, hey, this is your last year, and if you don't do, X, we're pulling the cane out and
Well,
we're
it seems
hooking
like
you off stage.
as I say, that seems like that's what happened with Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy. Like McCarthy was kind of angling for that job months before the season even started.
Yeah, but I guess the other issue there is that you still need to like make sure that you pull the trigger in time to like be in the
Right,
race for
right.
the available coaches, and that's I
Right.
think has been an issue with this team in the past at times.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about, is there any hope that the 2024 Dallas Cowboys are different? We will get to that next. This next segment is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who is unbiased in your life. So today I want to tell you how I really feel about something, maybe something that you've even been thinking about this week. I'm frustrated as a millennial Cowboy fan. I didn't get the benefit of watching the 90 Cowboys growing up, but I've only seen 4 playoff wins, but everybody hates my team anyways because of stuff that happened before I was even alive. It's frustrating, Landon. It's kind of frustrating. This is a good little therapy session between you and I. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have much bigger problems than the Dallas Cowboys or Mike McCarthy or Dan Quinn. And it's important to get these things off of your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Landon, there's a lot of Cowboy fans that are just depressed, discouraged about this team moving forward. I saw the tweets yesterday. I'm not watching this Cowboys team. I even saw some people say I'm not reading or listening to any Cowboys related podcasts until the season starts.
Hey,
except for us. They're going to listen to us.
Except
Don't
for
worry.
us. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Is there hope that the 2024 team could be different?
I mean, yes, of course, there's always hope. And that's ultimately my problem, is that I'm a pessimist that believes that there is hope, even when maybe there's not as much. But I do think that, again, like, I think this is a nuanced conversation. And it's not always black and white. Hiring Mike McCarthy doesn't mean there's no hope. Firing Mike McCarthy doesn't mean there's all hope. It's not as black and white as that. Is there a chance that this team figures it out and like plays better football next year and like just seems to kind of iron out some of the issues that they've had these last few seasons and kind of get over the hump? Absolutely, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, sure. This is still one of the most talented teams in football, and that's part of the reason that we have frustration, right? Is that this team earned that frustration, if for lack of a better term, right? They earned it in the sense both ways, right? They earned it in the sense that they were good enough to build up our hopes, and then they earned it in the sense that they were bad enough to let us down. So does this team, with this incredibly talented roster that was able to win all these football games in the regular season and get themselves into a position to let us down, have the chance to break through? Absolutely, that is something that definitely could happen. I think what we're arguing is the percentages, right? Like, we feel like the percentage of what we need to do is a lot more likely if we do this or we do that. But that doesn't mean that there is no chance or no hope for this. And look, I still think that part of the reason that we suffer, so much when we lose is because there's a belief that it can be different this year. And every time that something happens for the first time, or every time that something happens for the first time in a long time, there had to be a moment where it wasn't happening, right? And you had to get through that moment and overcome the odds to be victorious. So it's always dark, before you reach the dawn. It's always going to be difficult and hard to win a Super Bowl because it's a difficult task. And I know I remember back in the, I'm a Cowboys fan, obviously, but one of the most endearing moments I remember from the 90s was Steve Young, who was one of the greatest quarterbacks in football history. Like Steve Young going onto the sideline telling, I don't even remember, maybe it was Jerry Rice, I can't remember, can you pull this monkey off my back? Because he was finally winning that game and finally getting it. I think it was going into the Super Bowl, or maybe it was winning the Super Bowl. I can't remember. But either way, I remember how people used to talk about Steve Young. And then after he won, no one ever brings that up again. No, like I haven't heard about Steve Young not being able to win the big one in 30 years. So yes, there's always hope. There's always the opportunity, in much in the way that we discuss in a negative way, that the ball is oblong and can bounce a weird way. It can bounce a weird way for you sometimes. So there is a chance that this team can go and win the Super Bowl. It's just, not the path that I was hoping to see going into the season.
One of the good things, and I don't want to look ahead too much, but one of the good things is their schedule is going to be, I think, harder next year. They play at San Francisco, a game. They play the AFC North next year that had 3 playoff teams. They play the Ravens. I think one of their extra games is against the Texans next year. Previous years, we've kind of wanted to see them have an easier schedule, so that way they could get to 12-5 or whatever, make sure they get to the playoffs. Kind of done hoping that they have an easy schedule. I want them to have the hardest possible route and be a little bit more battle tested, because we saw this year, like, it's great that you won 12 games, but when a lot of those games come against some bad teams and your only big victories were the Eagles game, which was impressive because the Eagles only lost 2 games up until that point, and then the Lions game in week 17, I just don't think there was a lot of confidence in the team that they could go into a big game situation and win, because almost every other game that they had won, they lost. And in several of those games, they were blown out, including the Bills and the 49ers game. I think 2024 is going to give them a lot of opportunities to be battle tested. And frankly, because the division has frankly kind of sucked the last couple of years, I think they need it. I really think they need it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is something that you and I have talked about the last few years going into the playoffs, is that, there's no sneaking into the Super Bowl. Like there's no like, ooh, we just slipped in, we got that Super Bowl and we walked away. Like, you're gonna have to beat the best teams in the least fun scenarios in order to get and to win the Super Bowl. Yeah. So unless trying to find the easy path to into the playoffs and through the playoffs, that's not the best way to do this.
I'm going to even give you an example from last year. Philadelphia, I think, had the easiest path to the Super Bowl I've ever seen. Exactly. They played the Giants at home in round 2, a team that they beat twice that year. And then they played the 49ers at home with no quarterback, really, because Brock Purdy and Josh Johnson got hurt. Yeah. By the time they got to the Super Bowl, their defense just wasn't ready to play that caliber of game. And that's ultimately why they lost. They gave up how many points to Patrick Mahomes and that mismatched cast of receivers.
Yeah, it's when there's no room for error, when it's one loss, right? You can't hope to slip by some easy teams for 4 straight games in the playoffs. It just isn't going to happen. So if you're not ready to face that team when they show up and they're tough, you're going to get blown away. And frankly, for the Cowboys, that happened right up front. And so, this is, it kind of again goes to the issue of why this is difficult, is because this is learning to win and survive in the playoffs is one of the hardest things you can learn, as a team. And they've been in several of these situations. I don't know how much they've actually learned.
I do think this year is going to provide them a lot of opportunities for mental toughness. I kind of am of the belief that McCarthy being a quote unquote lame duck coach is a good thing, right? Because now there's no safety net. Now it's, well, if we go 12-5 and we lose in round 1, we had a good season. Everybody's going to be brought back. I just think maybe I could be completely wrong, but I think there's going to be a different sense of urgency from everybody, especially if Tyron Smith comes back, if Zach Martin comes back, DeMarcus Lawrence in the last year of his deal. We'll see what they do with Dak's contract. I just get the sense that I think everybody in that organization is going to know it has to be a deep, deep playoff run in order for people to survive keeping their jobs. If not, it's going to look totally different in 2025. Totally different.
It should.
It should.
The core of that group that you just mentioned is getting older, and there's not a lot of time left on that anyway.
No.
So, I don't know how much more, if they can't manage to get through with this group next year, it may be time to kind of reset the table a little.
This feels like a burn the boats type of season for the Cowboys. Where like
it better be. Because here's the thing. Like I felt that way 2 years ago. I felt, there's been too many times that we've been through this in the last decade plus where it should have been an all-in season and it wasn't. And so if you're going to bring back Mike McCarthy, then they better view this as an all-in season.
I agree. Let's talk about potential changes in 2024 next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question: what do I need to do to take my business to the next level? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team that you surround yourself with. That is why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have this many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn knows that so many businesses right now are wearing a ton of different hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, that process is quick and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions. I know we promised to answer them today. Had a little bit of breaking news that we had to handle, so make sure you send them into us for Friday. Landon, let's finish up with this. What changes are you expecting and hoping for in 2024?
Well, I mean, I think based on what we heard from Mike McCarthy this morning in his press conference, obviously they feel like they have a deficiency in the run game on both sides of the ball. So they're going to be doing whatever they can to kind of make adjustments there. Look, I mean, it does feel kind of fruitless at times to haggle over these kind of position coaching changes and that sort of thing. I think they need a change at offensive line coach again. I think that the techniques that they were using, were not helping Terrence Steele in the pass pro game, and the run game just never looked good ever. And
now, I will say, I thought that as a unit, I thought the pass pro was pretty good this year, but I do agree with Steele in particular. I thought he struggled as a pass blocker, and the run game was never there.
Yeah, and I just think it wasn't enough to kind of warrant, keeping a group that didn't seem to be adding too much, So I just think that the Cowboys need to find their Dante Scarnecchi. They need to find a long-term, serious offensive line coach that they can pay like a head coach, frankly, and bring him in here for like just some stability there. So I think that would help solve some of the run game stuff. I think it would also help with some of the pass protection stuff, which pass pro wasn't terrible, but I think it would just kind of generally improve things a little bit more. I would say the pass pro wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't up to what we would expect from the guys when they're healthy. I'll say that.
He's
And then I think
like Zach Martin, because I struggle with this because I thought like the guys that came in like off the bench played as good as I've seen Cowboy offensive linemen play. But I do agree. Like I thought this was, I think this was Zach Martin's worst year of his career. Now that could be because of injuries. I thought Terrence Steele regressed, but I also think maybe this is one of Tyron's best years. So it's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. I just think that I don't necessarily hate the plan. Like the what they're doing in pass protection, that makes a lot of sense. They do have good plans, but it just feels like some of the technique stuff that they're using, that they're being asked to use, has been problematic. Duke Mayweather pointed some of this stuff out too, like requiring them to throw with their outside hands every single time, which can be problematic. So it's just stuff like that, But I think that they're going to make changes there. We're going to have to figure something out at defensive tackle and linebacker again, and so we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, Overshown's coming back, but there's still, if you're going to try to solve that, like it's going to mean making some changes personnel wise with the people that are on the roster and that you might want to bring in from outside the roster.
I'll just say really quickly. Again, I have mixed feelings on Dan Quinn. As the positives for Dan Quinn, this is 3 straight years that the Cowboys have led the NFL in takeaways. I do think he's done a good job of finding some players like a Marquise Bell. Marquise Bell coming in and playing this many games at linebacker, and for the most part, playing really well. I think it's awesome. I think he's done a good job of developing Micah Parsons and moving him around. I think Tank Lawrence has played extremely well in his scheme. But if Mike McCarthy's talking about fixing the run game, I don't think it's a personnel issue. I do a little bit. Like I think they've got to get better personnel at stopping the run. I just don't know if Dan Quinn's ever going to be that guy that knows how to get the right run fits in there, because it's not really his philosophy. His philosophy is to create turnovers and get after the quarterback, and it's not necessarily worrying about stopping the run.
Well, and this goes into the kind of collateral problem with all of these suggestions, is that how much do you want both of these units focusing on run? Like especially on offense, like how much do you want that unit working specifically only on trying to get better at the run, when I felt like there was that kind of emphasis early in the season last season, and they had to make adjustments to throw the football a little bit more. It's like there's a difference between putting an emphasis on getting better in the run and like emphasizing the run in your game plan. But the problem is that I don't know that the Cowboys knew what the difference was, right?
I want them to be more technically sound when it comes to stopping the run. That's the one.
Towards stopping the run, yeah.
Yeah, when you watch this tape against Green Bay, there's holes all over the place. There's guys out of position. There's guys not even looking at the ball when it's being handed off. I think Dan Quinn is a really good defensive coordinator, but it's been 3 years, and a lot of his issues just haven't been solved. I do wonder if it's time for a different voice in that room. And I know that means you're going to get fewer takeaways moving forward, but it might be worth it. The trade-off might be worth it.
Yeah, and maybe it's not that many, because I think part of takeaways is about who you've got playing on that defense and the kind of ball,
quarterback, your
playmakers, and yeah, exactly. So, and I think the Cowboys still have those guys. So we'll see.
Yeah, to be fair, I think the Dan Quinn thing is going to take care of itself.
Probably.
I'm not sure the Cowboys are going to have to worry about making a decision there. I think it's going to be made for them. But who they hire as the next defensive coordinator is fascinating to me. Is it Joe Witt, who they've been kind of grooming for this role, or do they think about going outside of the organization and bringing in maybe a more established defensive coordinator to fix that side of the ball, or not fix, because that's the wrong word, because they were good.
Yeah,
on defense.
well, because that's the other thing too, Marcus, is that if they bring in another guy, now you're talking about the all-in season where we're learning a new defensive scheme, and it's like this mismatched schedule that that's.
I
been a
will say
problem
you
for the
can
Cowboys.
I think you can fix that pretty quickly. We saw like Jim Schwartz in Cleveland. Like, look how quickly he turned that into the best defense in the NFL. Same with Mike McDonald in Baltimore. I think if you get the right coach, it won't
You
be
got
a
to get.
huge issue.
If Jim Schwartz or Mike McDonald are available, let's sign them right now and then get that done.
I've got options. I've got some players or coaches that I want to talk about maybe next week as we look for a new defensive coordinator.
Good tease. Good tease.
Yeah, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter. Try to cheer him up a little bit at BCP. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.